Kabul, Afghanistan, August 2022. The air tasted like smoke and dust. 7 stories above the chaos of Kabul's final American evacuation, Evelyn Blackwell pressed her cheek against the stock of her Remington 700. The rooftop concrete still held the day's heat radiating up through her tactical vest. Below, the last convoy of American personnel moved toward the airport perimeter like ants fleeing a disturbed nest. She was 26 years old, 5'3", 120 pounds soaking wet. And right now, she was the only thing standing between 300 American lives and the Taliban gunmen positioning themselves in the surrounding buildings. Her spotter's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Raven, we've got movement. Northeast corner, 11 o'clock, 700 yards. She didn't respond. Talking wasted oxygen, and oxygen mattered when you were about to take a life at a distance most people couldn't throw a baseball. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, the world compressed into a circle of clarity. A man in traditional Afghan clothing emerged onto a rooftop 3 blocks away, AK-47 in hand. He moved with purpose, not panic. Trained, dangerous. Evelyn's finger rested alongside the trigger guard. Not on it. Never on it until the decision was made. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind, riding the same Montana wind that had carried his lessons across their ranch 20 years ago. Shooting ain't about killing, little bird. It's about protecting. You pull that trigger when there's no other choice, and when you do, you make it count. The man on the rooftop raised his rifle, aimed it down at the convoy. Evelyn's breathing slowed. In, out, in, out. Between heartbeats there existed a space of absolute stillness. Her grandfather had called it the quiet room, the place where fear couldn't follow, where doubt died. She slipped into that room now. Her finger moved to the trigger. The world narrowed to fundamentals. Wind speed 8 miles per hour left to right, temperature 94 degrees, humidity low, distance 732 yards. Elevation, she was higher. Shooting down gravity would pull the bullet faster. The math happened in her subconscious muscle memory and training fusing into instinct. She exhaled half a breath, held it, squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with familiar violence. Through the scope, she watched the man drop his weapon, clattering harmlessly across the rooftop. "Target down," her spotter confirmed. Evelyn was already scanning for the next threat. Over the next 5 minutes, 6 more men made the fatal mistake of thinking that they could attack Americans with impunity. 6 more times, Evelyn's rifle spoke with cold precision. 700 yards, 800, 900, her longest shot 1,380 yards, nearly 0.8 of a mile. The bullet took nearly 2 full seconds to reach its target, arcing through the hot Afghan air like a messenger from God. 7 shots, 7 hits, 7 Taliban fighters who would never threaten another American convoy. When it was over, when the last vehicle disappeared through the airport gates, Evelyn finally allowed herself to breathe normally. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. That steadiness was in her blood, passed down through generations like blue eyes or the curve of a smile. Her spotter, a grizzled Marine sergeant named Davies, stared at her with something approaching awe. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 15 years. That was the finest shooting I've ever witnessed." Evelyn didn't respond. She was already breaking down, her rifle hands moving with practiced efficiency. Mission complete. Time to move. What she didn't know, couldn't know, as she packed her gear and descended those 7 stories, was that this mission would be her last in theater for a while. That the success here would earn her a transfer back to the States. A new assignment. A cover identity so deep that even the soldiers guarding the base where she worked wouldn't know who she really was. She didn't know that in exactly 2 years, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything would change. She didn't know that secrets buried in the Bosnian mountains would claw their way back to the surface. And she had no idea that her grandfather, the man who'd taught her everything about patience and precision and the weight of necessary violence, was still alive. Oceana, Virginia Beach, September 2024. The Honda Civic was 12 years old and had a dent in the rear bumper from a Walmart parking lot incident Evelyn preferred not to remember. It was the least threatening vehicle imaginable, which made it perfect. She pulled up to the main gate at Naval Air Station Oceana at exactly 6:45 in the morning. Same time as always. Routine was armor. Routine was invisible. The guard on duty was new. That was her first warning sign. Corporal Hayes had been working this gate for 3 years. Knew her by sight, waved her through with barely a glance at her ID badge. But today, Hayes was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a young sergeant she'd never met stepped out of the guard shack. Sergeant Holden Reeves, 22 at most, fresh-faced and eager, with the rigid bearing of someone still proving himself. His name tape was crisp, his boots mirror polished. 6 months out of advanced infantry training, Evelyn guessed. Maybe 8. "Morning, ma'am," he said with military courtesy. "ID and vehicle registration, please." She handed them over without comment. Her ID identified her as Evelyn Blackwell, Administrative Assistant, Building 7. The registration showed a boring car owned by a boring person living in a boring apartment in Norfolk. Reeves studied both documents with the intensity of someone who'd been taught that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. He wasn't wrong, just overzealous. "Miss Blackwell," he said slowly, "I'm going to need you to pop your trunk." "Of course." She reached down, pulled the release. The trunk lid lifted with a small hydraulic sigh. Reeves walked to the back of the car. Evelyn watched him in the rearview mirror. His body language changed the instant he looked inside. Shoulders tensed, hand moved instinctively closer to his sidearm. "Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle." His voice had gone flat, professional, controlled fear masquerading as procedure. Evelyn complied, moving slowly, hands visible. No sudden movements. Nothing that could be misinterpreted by a nervous young soldier whose training was screaming at him that something was wrong. 2 more guards emerged from the shack. Security was tightening around her like a fist. "Ma'am, can you explain what's in your trunk?" Evelyn knew what he'd seen. A gym bag, a laptop case, and a hard-shell gun case, matte black professional grade with reinforced locks. "A rifle," she said simply. "You're aware that bringing personal firearms onto a military installation requires prior authorization." "I am." "Do you have that authorization?" "I do." Reeves looked skeptical. Administrative assistants didn't carry sniper rifles. Administrative assistants didn't have authorization for weapons that cost more than most people's cars. He opened the case. The Remington 700 lay in its foam cradle like a sleeping predator. Custom stock, free-floating barrel, Schmidt & Bender scope worth $6,000 on its own. This wasn't a hunting rifle. This wasn't a sport shooter's toy. This was a tool designed for one purpose, putting bullets exactly where they needed to go at distances that defied belief. "Ma'am, this is a military-grade precision rifle." "Yes." "What's an administrative assistant doing with military hardware?" Before Evelyn could answer, another voice cut through the morning air. "Sergeant Reeves!" Everyone turned. A man approached from the direction of the base interior. Mid-30s, weathered face, the kind of scars you collected in places where people actively tried to kill you. He walked with the slight limp of someone who'd taken shrapnel and lived to tell about it. Sergeant First Class Desmond Trent, former Marine Scout sniper, 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and currently assigned to base security with a specialty in recognizing things that didn't belong. Trent's eyes moved from the rifle to Evelyn's face. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or suspicion. "I'll take it from here," Trent said. Reeves looked relieved to hand off the problem. He stepped back but didn't leave. This was training, watching how senior NCOs handled unusual situations. Trent picked up the rifle with the careful reverence of someone who understood what it was. His fingers traced the stock, tested the weight, examined the scope mounting. "Custom build," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Schmidt & Bender, PM2 scope, 5 to 25 magnification." "Correct." "This particular model runs about $12,000 all told." His eyes found hers. "That's a year's salary for someone in your pay grade." "I've had it a while." "I'm sure you have." He set the rifle down, carefully closed the case. "Miss Blackwell, I'm going to need you to come with me to the security office. We're going to make some calls, verify some things. Shouldn't take long." "Am I being detained?" "You're being asked to cooperate with a routine security inquiry," which was military speak for, "Yes, you're being detained, but we're being polite about it." Evelyn nodded. "I'd like to make a phone call." "You'll have that opportunity at the security office." 20 minutes later, she sat in a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. The rifle case sat on the table between her and Sergeant Trent, like evidence at a crime scene. "So," Trent said, settling into his chair with the patience of a man who'd conducted 100 interrogations. "You want to tell me what's really going on here? I'm an administrative assistant who shoots competitively on weekends." "Competitive shooting?" His tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. "With a rifle that's specifically designed for military applications. It's legal to own." "Legal, yes. Common, no." He leaned forward. "I've been shooting for 20 years, Miss Blackwell. I know the difference between someone who punches paper at a range and someone who's trained to put rounds on target at distances where most people need binoculars just to see what they're aiming at." Evelyn said nothing. Your hands, Trent continued. No manicure, short nails, calluses on your trigger finger and the heel of your palm. Those are shooter's hands. And the way you carry yourself, the way your eyes track movement, the way you position yourself when you got out of the car to keep both exits in your peripheral vision. That's not admin work. That's tactical awareness. He was good, better than she'd expected. So I'm going to ask you again, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Who are you? Evelyn met his gaze steadily. I'm someone who needs to make a phone call. Trent studied her for a long moment, then slid his phone across the table. One call, make it count. She picked up the phone, dialed a number from memory. 10 digits, no name attached, the kind of number that didn't appear on any public directory. It rang twice. A voice answered. Male measured the kind of voice that had given orders in places where orders meant the difference between mission success and body bags. Blackwell, Evelyn said simply. Situation Gamma, NAS Oceana. Building 7 cover compromised. Understood. Stand by. The line went dead. Evelyn set the phone down. Someone will be here in 10 minutes. Trent raised an eyebrow. Someone with enough rank to clear this up. And who exactly did you just call? Before she could answer, Trent's own phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned. The caller ID read, Secure Line Pentagon. He answered, Sergeant Trent. Evelyn couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Trent's expression transform from confidence to confusion to something approaching shock. Yes, sir, he said finally. I understand, sir. Right away, sir. He ended the call, stared at the phone like it had personally betrayed him, then looked at Evelyn with new eyes. That was Rear Admiral Victor Hayes, Office of Naval Intelligence. His voice had gone very quiet. He says you have top secret clearance with special access programs. He says the rifle is authorized. He says I am to return your weapon immediately and forget this conversation ever happened. I appreciate your diligence, Sergeant. He also said, Trent continued, that asking questions about you or your assignment would be a career-ending mistake. Evelyn stood, closed the rifle case, picked it up. Then I suggest you don't ask questions. She walked to the door, then paused, turned back. Sergeant Trent, your shooting stance favors your right side by about 2 degrees. Probably compensation for that shrapnel wound in your left hip. It's not noticeable at close range, but at distance it'll throw your accuracy. Might want to work on that. She left him sitting there, mouth slightly open, trying to figure out how she'd known about an injury he'd never mentioned to anyone on this base. The truth was simpler than Sergeant Trent could have imagined, and more complicated than he could have believed. Evelyn Blackwell wasn't just an administrative assistant who happened to be an excellent shot. She was the highest-rated sniper in a program so classified that even the people running the base didn't know it existed. Project Artemis, named for the Greek goddess of the hunt, Artemis recruited trained and deployed women for precision marksmanship missions in environments where male operators would be conspicuous or ineffective. Diplomatic protection details, embassy security, counterterrorism operations in countries where a woman with a rifle drew less attention than a 6-foot-tall American man in tactical gear. The program had been running for 8 years. Evelyn had been part of it for 4. 47 missions, 47 successful completions, 0 failures. But to everyone outside a circle of perhaps 50 people in the entire United States government, she was just Evelyn, the quiet girl from Building 7 who filed reports and organized supply requisitions. The administrative job was real enough. She actually did work there, actually did process paperwork. The cover had to be deep enough to withstand scrutiny, lived in enough to seem authentic. Most days, nothing happened. She filed. She organized. She attended meetings about office supplies that made her want to scream. And then sometimes her phone would buzz with a coded message and she would disappear for days or weeks. And when she came back, she would file more reports about things that never happened in places she'd never been. It was exhausting, isolating, lonely in ways that had nothing to do with being alone. But it was necessary. And more than that, it was in her blood. Montana, 18 years earlier. The wind came down from the mountains like cold breath carrying the scent of pine and snowmelt. 8-year-old Evelyn Blackwell sat very still, cheek pressed against the worn stock of a youth model. .22 rifle eye aligned with iron sights that pointed at a tin can 60 yards away. Breathing, her grandfather said softly. She adjusted, slowing her breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like he'd taught her. Garrett Blackwell stood behind his granddaughter, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. At 66 years old, he still moved like a younger man, back straight, eyes sharp. His hands were weathered from decades of ranch work, but they didn't shake. They never shook. Winds from the west, he said. Quarter value left to right. What does that mean? Bullet drifts right, Evelyn said. How much, she thought. Math had never been hard for her. At 60 yards with a 22, maybe an inch. Close enough. So where do you aim? 1 inch left of center. Show me. She adjusted her point of aim, settling the front sight just to the left of the can. Her finger rested alongside the trigger guard, waiting. Now, Garrett said, here's the most important lesson I'm ever going to teach you. You listening? Yes, sir. Shooting a gun isn't about the gun. It's about the decision. Every time you pull a trigger, you're making a choice. That choice has consequences. You understand? I think so. You will. His voice carried weight now, the tone of a man who'd made those choices himself. Before you shoot, you ask yourself, is this necessary? Is this the only way? And if the answer is yes, then you commit. No hesitation, no second guessing. You make the shot and you live with it. Evelyn didn't fully understand. Not then. She was 8 years old, shooting at cans in a field, playing what seemed like a game. But their words lodged in her memory like seeds waiting for the right season to grow. All right, little bird, Garrett said. Make the shot. She settled herself, found that quiet space inside where fear and excitement both fell away. Squeezed the trigger with steady pressure. The rifle cracked. The can jumped and spun. Good, Garrett said. Again. They shot for another hour. Cans at 60 yards, then 80, then 100. By the end, Evelyn's shoulder ached and her ears rang despite the protective muffs, but she'd hit 17 out of 20 targets. As they walked back toward the ranch house, rifle broken open and safe, Garrett said, You got a gift, Evelyn. Same gift your daddy had, same one I had. Steady hands and a calm heart. That's rarer than you know. Daddy doesn't shoot anymore, Garrett's expression darkened. No, he doesn't. Thomas Blackwell, Evelyn's father, sat on the porch as they approached. He was only 36, but he looked older. The limp was permanent, courtesy of a Somali bullet that had shattered his femur in Mogadishu 11 years earlier. The nightmares were permanent too, though he never talked about them. He watched his daughter approach with her grandfather, saw the rifle, saw the happiness on her face, and something painful crossed his expression. Dad, he said to Garrett, can I talk to you? Sure thing. Evelyn went inside, but the ranch house walls were thin. She heard her father's voice tight with controlled anger. You can't do this to her. Do what teach my granddaughter a skill. Turn her into what we were, what you were. I'm teaching her to be capable, to be strong. You're teaching her to be a weapon. Thomas's voice cracked. I've seen what that does to people. What it did to you, what it did to me. I don't want that for her. The world's a dangerous place, son. So we make our 8-year-old daughter dangerous. That's the solution. I'm making her prepared. Silence, then Thomas quieter now. You ever think about the people you killed over there wherever you were? Because I do. I think about them every goddamn day. That's the difference between you and me, Garrett said, and his voice was sad. You were a soldier. Soldiers fight because they're ordered to. I was something else. I fought because some fights need fighting, and I made my peace with that a long time ago. I don't want her to have to make that peace. Maybe she won't have to, but if she does, I'd rather she have the skills to survive it. 8-year-old Evelyn didn't understand the full weight of that conversation, but she understood enough to know that her father was afraid. Not of enemies, not of war. He was afraid of her becoming something he recognized in himself. Present day, Building 7. Evelyn's office was exactly as boring as her cover identity required. Gray walls, standard issue desk, computer running Windows 10, filing cabinets filled with requisition forms and inventory reports. She'd been here for 8 months, long enough to establish pattern, long enough that people had stopped noticing her. Her coworkers were pleasant. Janet from accounting brought in cookies on Fridays. Mark from logistics told terrible jokes. Commander Willis, her nominal supervisor, was a decent man who actually cared about proper paperwork protocols. None of them had any idea who she really was. She spent the morning processing supply requests, riveting stuff. Staplers for Building 12, printer toner for the admin offices, a requisition for 300 feet of communication cable that would probably sit in a warehouse for 6 months before anyone remembered ordering it. At noon, she took her lunch to the cafeteria, bought a sandwich that tasted like cardboard in institutional disappointment, and sat alone at a corner table with a clear view of both entrances. Old habits. She was halfway through the sandwich when Sergeant Trent sat down across from her. Mind if I join you? He asked, though he was already sitting. It's a free country. Is it, though? He unwrapped his own sandwich. Because I just spent 2 hours being debriefed by my commanding officer about a phone call from Naval Intelligence ordering me to forget I ever met you. Evelyn took another bite of cardboard, said nothing. I did some research after you left, Trent continued. Background check. Called some buddies who know people. You know what I found? I imagine you're about to tell me. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You exist on paper, social security number, driver's license, employment records. But before 8 months ago, it's like you're a ghost. No social media, no digital footprint, no history. Some people value privacy. Privacy is one thing, this is something else. He leaned forward, voice dropping. I recognize the signs, Miss Blackwell. I've worked with enough spooks and special operators to know when someone's running deep cover. That's an interesting theory. It's not a theory. His eyes were serious now. Look, I'm not trying to blow your cover or compromise your mission or whatever. I'm just trying to understand. Because I spent 3 tours in Helmand Province. I was a scout sniper. And I've never in 15 years of shooting seen someone with your caliber of rifle for recreational purposes. Evelyn set down her sandwich, looked at him directly. Sergeant Trent, let me ask you something. When you were downrange making shots at 800 yards, trying to protect your Marines from Taliban fighters who wanted them dead, did you think of yourself as a recreational shooter? His jaw tightened. No, neither do I. She stood gathering her trash. Enjoy your lunch. She was at the door when her phone vibrated. Once, pause, twice, pause, 3 times. The pattern sent ice through her veins. Priority Alpha, immediate response required. She pulled out the phone. The message was already self-deleting as she read it. Hangar 6, 1400 hours. Artemis activation. Eyes only. The text disappeared, left no trace it had ever existed. Evelyn checked her watch. 1300 hours. 1 hour. She looked back at Sergeant Trent still sitting at the table watching her with those 2 observant eyes. Something wrong, he called. Just remembered a meeting. She forced a smile. Bureaucracy never sleeps. She left before he could ask more questions. Hangar 6, 1355. Hours Evelyn parked her Honda Civic outside Hangar 6 at 1355. The hangar sat at the far edge of the base, isolated from the main flight operations. Officially, it was listed as storage for decommissioned equipment. Unofficially, it was where people who didn't exist gathered to discuss missions that never happened. She grabbed her rifle case from the trunk. If she was being activated, she'd need it. The side door was unlocked. She slipped inside. The hangar's interior was vast and shadowed. Old aircraft parts lined the walls like mechanical skeletons. But in the center, 5 people stood around a folding table illuminated by harsh overhead lights. She recognized 4 of them. Captain Nathaniel Crane, 45 years old, former Delta Force, now CIA Special Activities Division. Silver hair, cut military short scar running down his left jaw from a knife fight in Mosul. He'd been her handler for 2 years. Colonel Silas Merrick, 67. Should have retired a decade ago, but was too valuable to let go. Delta Force original operator back when it was so new they hadn't even decided what to call it. Her mentor, the man who'd known her grandfather, Master Chief Sarah Kincaid, 38. Navy SEAL, one of the first women to make it through Bud S. Explosive ordnance disposal specialist and field medic. Arms crossed, expression unreadable. Technical Sergeant Wyatt Sterling, 31. Air Force cyber warfare specialist. Looked like he should be coding apps in Silicon Valley, not running drones over hostile territory. But Evelyn had seen him guide a Predator through a sandstorm to put a Hellfire missile through a 6-foot window. The 5th person she didn't recognize. Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Garrett, 52 according to the name tape on his uniform. Marine Force Recon. Built like a truck head, shaved face that looked like it had been hit with every hard object known to man. Gulf War veteran if the dates were right. Raven, Crane said, using her call sign. Thanks for coming on short notice. Sir. She set her rifle case down. What's the situation? First, Crane gestured to the Marine. Gunny Garrett, meet Lieutenant Blackwell. Raven Gunny will be providing security for this operation. Garrett looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. A 28-year-old woman in civilian clothes carrying a rifle case. He'd seen 1,000 weekend warriors with expensive gear and no skills. Sir, Garrett said carefully, with respect, what's her role in this? Primary shooter, Merrick said flatly. Garrett's eyebrows rose. The primary shooter is a what? Evelyn asked pleasantly. To his credit, Garrett caught himself. Someone I haven't worked with before. First time for everything, Gunny. Crane pulled a tablet from his jacket, swiped through several security screens. We're wheels up in 6 hours, so I'll make this brief. 3 days ago, NSA intercepted communications indicating a Russian contractor named Alexei Volkov entered the United States through the Canadian border. He pulled up a photo. Man in his late 30s, Slavic features, cold eyes. Volkov is former Spetsnaz, now works as a hired gun for the highest bidder. 15 confirmed kills across 3 continents. He's extremely good at what he does. Sterling typed on his laptop. A new image appeared. We believe his target is Senator Richard Thornton, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Evelyn studied the senator's photo. Mid-60s, gray hair, politician's smile. Why Thornton, she asked. Crane and Merrick exchanged a glance. Something passed between them. History. Secrets. The senator is investigating corruption in military procurement going back to the 1990s, Crane said carefully. Specifically, Operation Coldwater. The name hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Evelyn had never heard of it, but clearly everyone else in this room had. Operation Coldwater, Merrick said, his voice suddenly old and tired. It was a CIA program running arms to Bosnian and Kosovo resistance fighters during the Yugoslav wars. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it put millions of dollars worth of weapons into a war zone with minimal oversight. Let me guess, Evelyn said. Some of those weapons ended up in the wrong hands. Some of those weapons ended up committing war crimes, Merrick corrected. Massacres, ethnic cleansing, and certain people in our government knew about it and covered it up to protect their careers. Senator Thornton is about to blow the lid off the whole thing, Crane continued, which means someone wants him dead before he can testify. And we're protecting him, Evelyn said. Correct. Covert protection detail. Thornton doesn't know we're there. FBI can't move openly without tipping off whoever hired Volkov, so it's us, small team invisible, keeping the senator alive while we identify and neutralize the threat. Made sense, except, Sir, Evelyn said slowly, why does this require an Artemis activation? This sounds like straight protective detail. You've got Gunny Garrett, Master Chief Kincaid Sterling on Overwatch. You don't need me for this. Merrick cleared his throat. Actually, Raven, we do, because there's something you need to know about Operation Coldwater. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, taken with film, not digital. It showed 4 men in combat gear standing in front of a Humvee, mountains in the background. The photo was dated April 1997. Merrick pointed to one of the faces. That's me, 27 years younger and considerably more stupid. He moved his finger to another man. That's Major Clayton Voss, now Brigadier General Voss, currently assigned to Special Operations Command. A third man. Captain Viktor Volkov, Russian military advisor officially, mercenary and arms dealer actually, father of our current problem, Alexei. And the fourth man. Evelyn's breath stopped. The fourth man was her grandfather, Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Blackwell, age 59, standing in the Bosnian mountains in 1997, very much alive, despite the fact that he'd supposedly died in Panama in 1991. No, she heard herself say, that's not possible. I'm sorry, Raven, Merrick said, and he genuinely sounded it. Your grandfather didn't die in 1991. The Panama story was cover. He died in Bosnia, in 97, during Operation Coldwater. The room tilted. Evelyn grabbed the edge of the table. How? Merrick's face was granite. He was murdered, shot twice in the back of the head and dumped in a ravine. We reported it as a training accident, closed casket, military honors. All of it was a lie designed to cover up the truth. What truth? That Garrett discovered Voss was selling weapons to both sides of the conflict, making millions while people died. Your grandfather was going to report it. Blow the whistle. Voss couldn't allow that. Evelyn's vision had gone red at the edges. Who killed him? Viktor Volkov, on Voss's orders. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. And now Viktor's son is here, she said quietly, going after the one senator who might expose what happened. Correct. So Voss hired Alexei, like father, like son. That's our working theory. Evelyn looked at the photo again, her grandfather 27 years younger standing beside the men who would orchestrate his murder. Did he know in that moment? Did he suspect? Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Merrick met her eyes. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because if we're going to stop Volkov, if we're going to protect Thornton and maybe finally bring some justice for what happened to your grandfather, I need you completely clear-headed. No surprises in the field. You think I can't be objective. I think you're human. I think you just learned your grandfather was murdered by the father of the man we're hunting. I think that's a lot to process. Evelyn looked at each person in the room, Crane watching her carefully. Kincaid expressionless but alert, Sterling sympathetic, Garrett confused about what was happening, but smart enough to stay quiet. And Merrick, her mentor, the man who'd trained her, shaped her, turned her into the weapon she was today. The man who'd stood beside her grandfather hours before he died and done nothing. Colonel, she said softly, were you there when he was killed? Merrick's jaw clenched. Yes. Did you try to stop it? He stopped, started again. I was a captain. Voss was my commanding officer. Victor had a gun. I was told to stand down or face the same fate. I made a choice. I've lived with that choice for 27 years. You let him die. Yes. No excuses, no justification. Just the flat admission of a man who'd been carrying that weight for nearly 3 decades. Evelyn wanted to scream, wanted to put her fist through something, wanted to grab Merrick by his collar and demand to know how he could live with himself. Instead, she took a breath, then another, found that quiet room inside where emotion couldn't reach. When do we leave? She asked. Crane blinked. You're still in... My grandfather was murdered. The people responsible are still out there. A senator trying to expose the truth is in danger. She looked at Merrick. And you're right, I'm human, but I'm also professional. Personal feelings don't matter when lives are at stake. That's what Grandpa Garrett taught me. Merrick's expression cracked. Just for a moment, pride and pain mixed together. Wheels up at 1900 hours, Crane said. Destination Outer Banks, North Carolina. Thornton has a beach house there. He's spending the weekend with his wife. We set up Overwatch, establish a perimeter wait for Volkov to make his move. And when he does, we take him alive if possible, dead if necessary. Either way, we protect the senator and we get answers. Evelyn picked up her rifle case. I'll need to grab some gear from my apartment. Can I have 4 hours? Make it 3, Crane said. We're on a tight timeline. She nodded, headed for the door. Raven, Merrick called. She stopped, didn't turn around. Your grandfather was the finest man I ever served with. What happened to him? That's on me. I should have done more. I should have been braver. I wasn't. But today maybe I can start making that right. Evelyn looked back over her shoulder. Don't do this for redemption, Colonel. Do it because it's the right thing to do. That's what he would have wanted. She left him standing there, an old man haunted by old ghosts. Outside, the Virginia sun was bright and warm. The world continued turning, oblivious to the revelations that had just shattered her understanding of her family's history. Her grandfather had been murdered. The man who'd taught her everything, who'd shaped her into what she was, had been killed because he'd tried to do the right thing. And now his killer's son was here in America, working for the same man who'd ordered that murder. Evelyn walked to her car, put the rifle in the trunk, sat in the driver's seat. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But inside, in a place she rarely acknowledged, something cold and dark was waking up. Justice was coming, and it would wear her grandfather's face. Outer Banks, North Carolina, 21:47 hours. The beach house sat like a monument to American success. 3 stories of weather-worn cedar and glass perched on stilts above the dunes where the Atlantic Ocean whispered its eternal secrets. Senator Richard Thornton had bought this place 20 years ago, back when he was just a state congressman with ambition and a wife who loved the sound of waves. Now at 64, he was one of the most powerful men in Washington, and possibly one of the most endangered. Evelyn pressed herself flat against the sandy earth 620 yards north of the house, hidden in a cluster of seagrass and scrub pine that had probably been growing here since before she was born. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, the world compressed into precise clarity. The senator's silhouette moved past a second-floor window, relaxed, unaware. His wife appeared beside him, said something that made him laugh. They looked like any other couple enjoying a weekend away from the world. They had no idea that world had followed them here. Raven, comms check. Captain Crane's voice crackled softly through her earpiece. Raven, I have eyes on Thornton. 2nd floor northeast bedroom, lights on, curtains open, no security visible. Copy that. Phantom has north perimeter. Crane's call sign was a remnant from his Delta days when he'd moved through Fallujah like smoke there and gone before the enemy knew he'd arrived. Bulldog has south approach. Gunnery Sergeant Garrett's voice was a low rumble. He'd positioned himself near the beach access road, the most likely route for any vehicle approach. Cipher and Overwatch. Sterling was a quarter mile away in a rented van disguised as a plumber's truck, monitoring every electronic signal within a 5-mile radius. If Volkov so much as made a cell phone call, Sterling would know. Doc ready for evac if needed. Master Chief Kincaid had a modified Range Rover parked 200 yards behind Evelyn's position, medical gear and weapons both standing by. Ironclad coordinating. Colonel Merrick was 2 miles inland at a Hampton Inn maintaining communication with naval intelligence and ready to call in support if everything went sideways. 6 professionals, 1 target to protect, and somewhere in the darkness a Russian killer who'd made a career of making impossible shots. The wind shifted, carrying salt spray and the smell of approaching rain. Evelyn adjusted her position slightly, settling deeper into the sand. She'd be here for hours, maybe all night. The art of sniping wasn't the shooting, it was the waiting. Her grandfather had taught her that. The thought sent a spike of pain through her chest. 24 hours ago, she'd believed Garrett Blackwell had died a hero in Panama when she was barely old enough to remember him. Now she knew he'd died in a Bosnian ravine, murdered by a mercenary on orders from a corrupt officer who valued money over honor. And the man who'd pulled that trigger had passed the family business to his son. Movement, Sterling's voice cut through her thoughts. Vehicle approaching from the west. Black van, no plates visible. 2 occupants. Evelyn's pulse didn't quicken. Training overrode biology. Distance. 3 miles out, heading toward the coastal highway. Could be nothing. Could be our boy. Cypher, can you get facial recognition? Working on it. Traffic camera coverage is shit out here, but I've got a satellite pass in 90 seconds. Evelyn waited. The senator moved away from the window. Lights went out in the bedroom, came on in what was probably the kitchen. Normal evening routine. Making dinner. Opening wine. Pretending the world wasn't hunting him. Got it, Sterling said. Driver is male Caucasian, 40-ish. Passenger is also male, younger, athletic build. Facial recognition is running now. Silence. Evelyn counted her own heartbeats. 58 beats per minute. Resting rate. Calm. Negative on Volkov, Sterling confirmed. Driver is a local contractor. Passenger is his son. They're heading toward Nag's Head, away from our position. Copy. Evelyn exhaled slowly. False alarm. First of many, probably. The night settled back into waiting. At 2300 hours, the senator and his wife went to bed. Lights out. House dark except for exterior security lights that made perfect aiming points for anyone who knew what they were doing. At midnight, Crane rotated positions with Bulldog. At 01:30, Evelyn ate an energy bar that tasted like sweetened cardboard and drank water from her Camelback. At 0300, she ran through her mental checklist for the 100th time. Wind 6 miles per hour northeast, temperature 62 degrees, humidity 73%, barometric pressure steady, moon waning crescent, minimal illumination. Her Remington 700 lay beside her like a sleeping hound waiting for the command to wake. Nothing happened. The sun rose at 0612, painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. The senator emerged onto his deck at 0730 with a cup of coffee, completely oblivious to the woman lying in the sand with a rifle trained on his property. Day 1 complete, Crane said as they rotated shifts. Everyone gets some rest. We go again tonight. Evelyn drove to the safe house. Merrick had arranged a dingy motel 8 miles inland that rented rooms by the week to fishermen and people running from something. She showered, ate, tried to sleep. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she lay on the thin mattress and thought about her grandfather. Tried to reconcile the man she'd known, the patient teacher who'd guided her young hands on a rifle stock, with the covert operator who'd died trying to expose corruption. He'd lived 2 lives. She was living 2 lives. The symmetry felt like inheritance. Her phone buzzed. Text from Merrick. Need to talk. Room 237. She dressed, walked 3 doors down, knocked twice. Merrick opened the door. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. The weight of 27 years of silence was catching up with him. Come in. The room was identical to hers. Cheap furniture, cheaper art, the smell of industrial cleaning products fighting a losing battle against mildew. I couldn't sleep, Merrick said. He sat heavily in the room's single chair. Keep seeing his face, your grandfather's, the way he looked at me when Voss gave the order. Like he understood. Like he forgave me. Evelyn leaned against the wall. Did you ask for forgiveness? No, I was too busy being a coward. You were a captain. Voss was your superior. Victor had a gun. Those are reasons, not excuses. Merrick's hands trembled slightly. I've spent 27 years telling myself I didn't have a choice. That I would have died too. That my death wouldn't have saved him. All true, all irrelevant. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow or the next day, we're going to face Volkov. And when we do, you're going to have a choice. Take him alive for questioning like the mission requires, or put a bullet in him for what his father did. Evelyn met his eyes. You think I can't be professional? I think you're human. I think vengeance is a powerful thing. I think your grandfather's blood is calling out from 27 years ago, and that's a hell of a voice to ignore. What would you do in my position? Merrick was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I'd probably kill him, which is why I'm not the one behind that rifle. You're better than me, Raven. Better than I was. Don't let what happened to Garrett turn you into what I became. And what's that? Someone who lives with ghosts instead of fighting for the living. Evelyn pushed off the wall. Get some sleep, Colonel. We have work to do. She was at the door when he spoke again. Raven, there's something else about Operation Coldwater. Something I didn't mention in the briefing. She turned. Garrett didn't just discover Voss was selling weapons. He had proof. Documents, bank transfers, photographs. Everything needed to bring Voss down. He'd hidden it somewhere, planned to turn it over to investigators. What happened to it? I don't know. After he died, Voss tore apart every location Garrett had been. Never found it. Either Garrett hid it too well, or someone else got to it first. Why does this matter now? Because if that evidence still exists, it doesn't just implicate Voss. It implicates everyone who knew about Coldwater and said nothing, including me, including people currently sitting in the Pentagon in Langley, people with the power and motivation to make sure Thornton never gets to testify. The implications crystallized in Evelyn's mind. You think Voss isn't the only one who wants Thornton dead? I think this goes deeper than one corrupt general. I think we might be protecting Thornton from our own side. Then who hired Volkov? That's what we need to find out, before someone on our side decides we know too much. Evelyn absorbed this. The mission had just gotten considerably more complicated. Does Crane know? Merrick hesitated. I trust Nathaniel with my life. But trust is a luxury we can't afford right now. Not until we know who's really pulling the strings. So we're operating blind in a mission that might be compromised from the inside. Fantastic. Welcome to Covert Operations. It's all fun and games until your own government tries to kill you. Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. Good night, Colonel. Good night, Raven. And thank you. For what? For being the person your grandfather hoped you'd become. Day 2, 2200 hours. The second night of surveillance started the same as the first. Evelyn in her hide position scope on the house team deployed in their sectors. Senator Thornton and his wife had spent the day on the beach dinner at a local restaurant back home by 2100 hours. All normal, all quiet, too quiet. At 22:15, Sterling's voice came through the comms. Cipher to all units. I've got something. Van parked on Ridge Road about 1 mile east of target location. Been stationary for 40 minutes. Description, Crane asked. White panel van, commercial plates. Registered to a rental company out of Norfolk. Rented 3 days ago. Cash payment, fake ID. Evelyn felt her pulse tick up slightly. 62 beats per minute now. Occupants. Can't see inside. Windows are tinted. But the van's sitting in a location with clear line of sight to the coastal highway. Perfect position for surveillance. Could be Volkov, Crane said. Could be a contractor doing legitimate work. Bulldog, you're closest. Can you get eyes on without compromising position? Negative, Garrett rumbled. I move from here, I leave the south approach exposed. I can go, Kincaid said. Give me 5 minutes. Do it. Everyone else maintain positions. Raven, keep your scope on that house. If this is a distraction, I don't want Thornton exposed. Copy. Evelyn forced her breathing to remain steady. This could be nothing. This could be everything. The waiting game had just become something else. 4 minutes later, Kincaid's voice whispered soft. Dock in position. I have visual on the van. It's empty. Empty? Crane's voice sharpened. You're certain? Positive. No driver, no passenger. Doors are locked, windows dark. Whoever was here is gone. Shit. Crane paused. It's a decoy. He wants us looking at the van while he moves into position somewhere else. Everyone eyes open. He's here. Evelyn's world narrowed to the scope picture. She systematically scanned the area around Thornton's house. Windows in neighboring properties, roof lines, the water tower 300 yards to the west. The old lifeguards stand on the beach. Every position that offered elevation and line of sight. Nothing. Raven, Sterling said suddenly, I'm picking up thermal signatures. Northwest of your position, approximately 800 yards. Elevated position, possibly in that old water tower foundation. Evelyn pivoted her scope. The water tower had been decommissioned years ago, left to rust like so many forgotten pieces of coastal infrastructure. Perfect hide for a sniper who knew what he was doing. Through thermal imaging overlay fed to her scope from Sterling's drone, she saw it. Heat signature, human-shaped, prone position, and the distinctive long shape of a rifle. Contact, she said quietly. Single male northwest, 800 yards. Sniper position confirmed. Can you ID? Crane demanded. Evelyn switched to maximum magnification. The figure was mostly obscured by the tower's structure, but she caught a glimpse of profile. Slavic features, age appropriate, right build. 70% confidence it's Volkov. Rules of engagement, Crane said. Disabled don't kill. We need him alive. Evelyn calculated the shot. 800 yards, moderate wind-elevated target, partially concealed by steel infrastructure. She could hit his shoulder, his leg, anywhere non-lethal. She'd made harder shots. Her finger moved to the trigger. And then Volkov's rifle swung away from Thornton's house, aimed at a completely different target. Wait, Evelyn said. He's not aiming at Thornton. He's targeting the house next door. Next door, Sterling typed frantically. That property is owned by a shell corporation, officially vacant. But wait, I'm picking up another heat signature inside. Someone's in there. Who? Crane demanded. Running facial recognition now through window thermal imaging. Got it. Holy shit. It's Dr. Vivian Cross. The name meant nothing to Evelyn, but clearly it meant something to Crane because his voice went cold and hard. Cross was a CIA analyst in the 90s. She worked directly under Clayton Voss during Operation Coldwater. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it's her. Merrick's voice cut in from his remote position. Nathaniel, if Cross is here, if she's the real target, then Volkov isn't here to kill Thornton, Crane finished. He's here to protect whoever is trying to kill Cross. The mission had just flipped inside out. New priority, Crane said. Raven, keep your scope on Volkov. If he moves to fire, you are authorized to neutralize. Everyone else converge on Cross's location. We need to get her out of there before... The rifle shot cracked across the night like breaking bone. Not from Volkov's position, from somewhere else entirely. Through her scope, Evelyn saw the muzzle flash. Approximately 450 yards south ground level, concealed in the dune grass. A second shooter. Shots fired, Garrett's voice. I've got a shooter south perimeter. He's... Another shot. Glass shattered in Cross's house. Evelyn made a split-second decision. Volkov was protecting Cross from the real assassin, which meant the real assassin was the priority target. She swung her rifle toward the muzzle flash, acquired the target through her scope. Male prone position, bolt action rifle, professional setup. And now he was adjusting his aim for a follow-up shot. Evelyn's training took over. Math became instinct. Wind distance, elevation, all of it processing faster than conscious thought. She fired. The Remington kicked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw her bullet strike exactly where she'd aimed. Not center mass, not a kill shot. She'd targeted his rifle itself, the scope mounting specifically. The bullet destroyed his optics and sent shrapnel into his face. He rolled away, clutching his eyes, weapon useless. Shoot her down, Evelyn reported. South position, 450 yards. Wounded, but alive. I'm on him, Garrett said. But Evelyn's attention was already moving, because Volkov, witnessing what had just happened, was doing something unexpected. He was lowering his rifle, standing up, making himself visible, and he was looking directly at Evelyn's position. Even at 800 yards, even in darkness, somehow he knew exactly where she was. He raised one hand, not in surrender, in acknowledgement. Shooter to shooter, professional respect. Then he was moving fast and fluid, disappearing into the darkness around the water tower. Volkov's running, Evelyn said. Northwest, heading toward the beach access road. Let him go, Crane ordered. Priority is securing Cross and identifying the shooter. Raven, stay on overwatch. Everyone else converge on Cross's location. Evelyn watched through her scope as Crane and Kincaid breached Cross's house. Watched as Garrett zip-tied the wounded shooter and dragged him into a sitting position. And she watched as Volkov's thermal signature disappeared into the maze of coastal roads and beach houses, evading pursuit like he'd been doing it his entire life. 10 minutes later, the situation stabilized. Cross was alive, unharmed except for minor cuts from glass. The shooter was secured, bleeding from facial lacerations, but stable. Thornton and his wife were awake and terrified, but untouched. Local police would arrive soon. Crane had already called in federal jurisdiction FBI agents en route to take over the scene and maintain the cover story. Gas leak. Accidental explosion. Nothing to see here. Evelyn packed her rifle and moved to the rally point, a parking lot 2 miles from the beach house where the team was regrouping. She arrived to find the wounded shooter sitting in the back of Garrett's truck, hands zip-tied, face bandaged where shrapnel had torn skin. He was conscious, alert, and staring at her with a mixture of pain and something that might have been admiration. "Hell of a shot," he said. His accent was American. Midwest, maybe. 800 yards night shooting and you hit the scope instead of me. That's skill. Evelyn said nothing. Crane stood nearby with Merrick, who'd driven in from the safe house. They were talking in low, urgent voices. She caught fragments. "Facial recognition confirms. Can't be possible. Need to isolate him before anyone else." She walked over. "Who is he?" Crane turned, and the expression on his face made her stomach drop. "Tell me," she said. Merrick pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Military ID. The same face, younger, cleaner, wearing Navy dress whites. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Pierce. Navy SEAL. Decorated veteran. Officially retired 3 years ago after 22 years of service. "Pierce was one of the best snipers the SEAL teams ever produced," Merrick said quietly. "Also one of the most ruthless. He took contracts after retirement, wet work for people who could afford the best." "So he's a mercenary," Evelyn said. "Who hired him to kill Cross?" That's when Crane's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and something in his expression changed. Hardened. "It's Admiral Hayes," he said. "Naval Intelligence." "This is the call I've been waiting for," he answered. "Put it on speaker." "Captain Crane." Admiral Hayes' voice was crisp and authoritative. "Status report. Sir, we've secured Dr. Cross. One hostile shooter in custody identified as Marcus Pierce. Second hostile, Alexei Volkov, escaped. Senator Thornton is safe. Good work. I'm sending a cleanup team to your location. FBI will handle the public-facing investigation. You and your team need to extract immediately and report to a secure facility for debriefing." "Understood, sir. What about Pierce?" "Bring him with you. I want to know who hired him." "Sir, Pierce was a SEAL, one of ours. The fact that he's working as a contractor targeting CIA personnel suggests—" "I'm aware of what it suggests, Captain, which is why I need you and your team isolated until we can determine the scope of the compromise. Trust no one outside your immediate unit. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." The call ended. Silence fell over the parking lot. "Well," Kincaid said finally, "that wasn't ominous at all." Crane looked at each team member in turn. "The Admiral's right. If Pierce was hired by someone inside our own government, we're exposed. Everyone pack your gear. We're leaving in 5 minutes." "What about Volkov?" Sterling asked. "Volkov's the least of our problems right now," Crane said. But Evelyn wasn't so sure. Because Volkov had been in position to kill Cross. He'd had the shot. He hadn't taken it. Instead, he'd waited watching until the real threat revealed itself. Volkov had been protecting Cross, which meant he was working for someone else, someone who wanted Cross alive. The question was who they loaded into 3 vehicles, Crane and Merrick in one, Kincaid and Sterling in another, Evelyn and Garrett in the third with Pierce secured in the back seat. As they drove away from the coast heading inland toward a safe house, Admiral Hayes had designated Evelyn studied Pierce in the rearview mirror. "Why Cross?" she asked. Pierce smiled through his bandages. "You'll figure it out eventually. You're Garrett Blackwell's granddaughter. Talent like that doesn't just appear. It's inherited." Evelyn's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You knew my grandfather. Knew of him. Legend in the sniper community. 1,800-yard kill in Cuba in 1962. That story's been passed around for decades. Most people think it's bullshit. Impossible shot." He paused. "But you just proved it's genetic. That scope shot you made, that was art. Answer the question. Why did you try to kill Cross?" "Because I was paid to. $500,000 to eliminate a middle-aged academic with no security and no idea she was being hunted. Easiest money I ever made, or would have been if you hadn't interfered." "Who paid you?" Pierce's smile widened. "That's the funny thing about being a professional. Client confidentiality matters. Even when you're caught." Garrett, riding shotgun, turned around. "Son, you're looking at federal murder for hire charges. Life in prison, minimum. Maybe you want to reconsider that confidentiality policy. Maybe, or maybe I want to stay alive long enough to see prison. Because the person who hired me, they don't leave loose ends. I talk, I'm dead within 24 hours. Doesn't matter what cell they put me in." "You're already a loose end," Evelyn pointed out. "The moment we caught you, your client's exposure increased. You're not valuable anymore. You're a liability." That hit home. Pierce's smile faded. "Think about it," Evelyn continued. "Your only leverage now is cooperation. Tell us who hired you, testify against them, and we can protect you. Stay silent, and you're just waiting for the knife in the dark." Pierce was quiet for a long moment. "Then, I want immunity. Full witness protection. New identity, new life, everything." "I can't promise that," Evelyn said. Then I can't talk. They drove in silence for another 20 minutes. The safe house was a farmhouse in rural North Carolina, isolated and defensible. Admiral Hayes had chosen well. They pulled up the gravel driveway. Crane's vehicle was already there along with a fourth car Evelyn didn't recognize. Rental plates. "Who's that?" Garrett asked, hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. The farmhouse door opened. A figure emerged, backlit by interior lights. Evelyn's breath caught. Dr. Vivian Cross stood in the doorway, very much alive and apparently free to move around, which was wrong. She should have been in protective custody, isolated, secured. Crane appeared behind Cross, and the expression on his face was all wrong too. Cold. Calculated. The look of a man who just made a decision that couldn't be unmade. "Raven," Crane called out, "bring Pierce inside. We need to have a conversation." Every instinct Evelyn had developed over 4 years of covert operations was screaming warning. "Garrett," she said quietly, "something's wrong." "Yeah," the Marine said, equally quiet. "I see it." Evelyn opened her door, stepped out, kept her hand near her concealed Sig Sauer. Garrett did the same on the passenger side. They moved around to Pierce's door, opened it, pulled him out. The man actually looked relieved to be in zip ties with a security detail, like being a prisoner was safer than whatever waited inside that farmhouse. They walked toward the door. Merrick stood beside Crane now, and the old colonel's face was ashen, like he'd seen something that had fundamentally altered his understanding of reality. "Nathaniel," Merrick said, his voice shook slightly. "This is wrong. We should. What Silas Crane's voice was conversational, pleasant even, which made it more terrifying than any amount of shouting. "Follow protocol, report to Admiral Hayes Trust, the chain of command." He pulled a pistol from his jacket, aimed it directly at Merrick's head. "The problem with protocol," Crane continued, "is that it assumes everyone's on the same side, and we're not. We haven't been for a very long time." Evelyn's hand moved toward her weapon. Fast, but not fast enough. 2 more figures emerged from the farmhouse, both armed, both professionals. Contractors by the look of them. They had Kincaid and Sterling at gunpoint, forced them outside. "Don't," Crane said to Evelyn without even looking at her. "Your hand moves another inch toward that Sig and I," dropped Merrick. "Then Sterling, then Kincaid. And then maybe we'll talk about what happens to you." Evelyn froze. "Good. You're smart. I always appreciated that about you." Crane gestured with his pistol. "Everyone inside, nice and slow, hands visible." They had no choice. Evelyn, Garrett, Merrick, Kincaid, Sterling, and Pierce were herded into the farmhouse living room. The contractors patted them down, removed weapons. Evelyn's Sig disappeared along with her backup knife and the garrote wire she kept in her belt. Crane stood by the fireplace, pistol held loosely but ready. Behind him, Dr. Cross sat in an armchair, looking not terrified but thoughtful, like she was watching a chess game play out and calculating her next move. "I imagine you have questions," Crane said. "Just one," Merrick said. His voice was steady despite the gun pointed at his skull. "How long have you been working for Voss?" Crane laughed. Actually laughed. "Is that what you think this is? That I'm some corrupt officer on a general's payroll? You just pulled a gun on your own team, Nathaniel. What else am I supposed to think? Try thinking bigger, Silas. Voss is small time. A greedy man who sold weapons and got rich. Boring. Predictable. I'm not working for Voss." "Then who?" Crane smiled. "I'm working for the same people you've been working for your entire career. The United States government. I'm just working for the part that understands how the world actually functions." He gestured to Cross. "Dr. Cross, would you like to explain? You're better at the politics than I am." Cross stood, smoothed her skirt. When she spoke, her voice was calm and professional, like she was delivering a briefing to Congress. "Operation Coldwater wasn't corruption," she said. "It was policy. Unofficial, deniable policy designed to achieve strategic objectives in the Balkans while maintaining plausible deniability. Yes, some weapons ended up in the wrong hands. Yes, some civilian casualties occurred. That's the cost of doing business in a war zone." "That's a war crime," Merrick said. "That's pragmatism, and Garrett Blackwell was going to destroy it. Not because the operation was morally wrong, but because he couldn't see the bigger picture. He was a good soldier, a great shooter, but a terrible strategist. He would have exposed Coldwater, embarrassed the CIA, damaged relationships with foreign allies, and for what? To feel morally superior." "To tell the truth," Evelyn said quietly. Cross looked at her with something approaching pity. "Truth is a luxury we can't afford. Your grandfather died because he valued his conscience over his country's interests. Don't make the same mistake." So what now? Sterling asked. You kill all of us to keep us quiet. Crane shook his head. I'm not a monster. I don't want anyone else to die. You're all patriots. You've all served honorably. That's why I'm offering you a choice. He gestured to Cross. Dr. Cross has documentation, evidence that will exonerate everyone involved in Operation Coldwater while still giving Senator Thornton something to work with, a modified truth. Some mid-level officers take the fall, some policy changes get implemented, everyone gets to feel like justice was served. And in exchange, all of you walk away. Return to your lives. No harm, no foul. And if we refuse, Merrick asked, then you're choosing to become obstacles. And obstacles get removed. I'll make it quick, professional, nothing personal. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Evelyn's mind raced. Crane had positioned himself well. 2 contractors with automatic weapons. Crane himself with his pistol. They were disarmed, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, but not outthought. You made a mistake, Evelyn said. Crane raised an eyebrow. Did I? You brought Pierce here. He knows who really hired him. And it wasn't Cross, was it? Pierce, sitting on the floor with his hands still zip-tied, looked up, met Evelyn's eyes, and smiled through his bandages. No, he said. It wasn't Cross I was hired to kill. That was the story Crane fed me. But the real target, the one I was actually supposed to eliminate tonight, he looked at Merrick. It was the colonel. Kill Merrick, make it look like Volkov did it, and suddenly the one person who witnessed Garrett Blackwell's murder 27 years ago is conveniently dead. No testimony, no evidence. Just another tragic casualty of international terrorism. Crane's pleasant expression finally cracked. Shut up. Why? Pierce continued. He was enjoying this now, the way a man with nothing left to lose enjoys chaos. They're all dead anyway, according to you. Might as well know the truth before they go. I said shut up, but Pierce kept talking, words tumbling out faster. Crane hired me 6 months ago, told me there would be a situation in North Carolina, a target that needed to be eliminated quietly. When the time came, I'd get coordinates and a kill order. I didn't know it was Merrick until tonight. Didn't know about Operation Coldwater or any of this political bullshit. I just knew someone was paying me $500,000 to make a man disappear. Crane's gun swung toward Pierce. One more word and the lights went out. Every light in the farmhouse killed simultaneously. Sterling's doing. He must have had a remote trigger, something Crane's contractors missed in their pat-down. Darkness, chaos, the sound of bodies moving fast. Evelyn dropped and rolled left exactly as her training dictated. Heard gunshots, muzzle flashes illuminating the room in strobe light bursts. Someone screamed. Someone else cursed. She felt along the floor, found Garrett's bulk, grabbed his arm. Window, she hissed. Now. They moved together, low and fast. More gunshots. The contractors were firing blinds, sweeping the room. Glass shattered as Garrett put his shoulder through the window, rolled outside. Evelyn followed. Behind them, the farmhouse erupted into sustained gunfire. She heard Crane shouting orders, heard return fire that sounded like Kincaid's preferred Glock 19. They ran, sprinted across the dark farmyard toward the tree line 50 yards away. More shots followed them, bullets kicking up dirt, but darkness was armor, and they made it to the woods. The others? Garrett panted. If they're alive, they'll evac on their own, Evelyn said. We need distance, and we need it now. They pushed deeper into the woods using moonlight and instinct to navigate. Behind them, the farmhouse was fully lit again, flashlights sweeping the grounds. After 10 minutes of hard movement, they stopped, listened. Pursuit sounds. Definitely. 2, maybe 3 people tracking them through the woods. We're unarmed, Garrett said quietly. They find us, we're done. Evelyn's mind worked through options. They needed weapons. They needed to reach friendly forces. They needed to figure out who they could trust. And they needed to warn Thornton that the real threat wasn't Volkov. It was the people sworn to protect him. Her phone. She still had her phone. Crane's people had taken weapons, but not phones, probably assuming they'd have time to collect them later. She pulled it out. No signal. Too rural. But wait, there was one thing she could do. She opened her encrypted message app, the one that bypassed normal cellular networks and used satellite uplink. Slower than text, but it would work anywhere on Earth. She typed Admiral Hayes, Crane compromised, Merrick in danger, need immediate extraction, current position. She checked her GPS coordinates, sent them. The message showed as sent. Now they just had to stay alive long enough for help to arrive. Garrett, she whispered, how do you feel about a fighting retreat? The old Marine grinned in the darkness. Like I'm 25 again and back in the shit. Let's do it. They moved parallel to their pursuers, letting them pass, then circled back toward the farmhouse. Toward the vehicles, toward weapons and a way out. It was risky, probably stupid. Definitely not what any tactical manual recommended. But Evelyn's grandfather had taught her something else too. Something that wasn't in any manual. Sometimes the best way forward was back through the danger you just escaped. Sometimes you had to trust your instincts over your training. And right now her instincts were screaming that if Crane wanted them dead in these woods, running deeper was just delaying the inevitable. So they'd go back. They'd find weapons. They'd get answers. In one way or another, they'd finish what Garrett Blackwell had started 27 years ago. Even if it killed them, the farmhouse sat 200 yards away through the trees, lit up like a beacon in the Carolina darkness. Evelyn counted 4 figures moving around the perimeter. 2 contractors plus Crane made 3. The 4th was probably Cross, which meant Merrick, Kincaid, and Sterling were either dead captured or had managed to escape in the chaos. She pushed the thought of their deaths away. Couldn't help them if she was paralyzed by fear. Beside her, Garrett breathed slowly and steadily, a man who'd learned patience in places where impatience got you killed. His eyes tracked the movement patterns, calculating timing and opportunity the way a predator calculates the moment to strike. 2-man patrol circuit, he whispered. 45-second rotation, window of maybe 10 seconds when the north side is clear. Enough time to reach the vehicles. If we're fast and lucky, I'll take those odds. They waited. The patrol passed flashlight beams sweeping the tree line, but not penetrating deep enough to catch them. Evelyn counted seconds in her head. 30, 35, 40. Now. They moved as one, keeping low, using every shadow and depression in the ground for concealment. The vehicles sat in a loose cluster near the farmhouse. Crane's rental, the truck Garrett had been driving, Kincaid's Range Rover. Evelyn reached Garrett's truck first, tried the door, locked. Of course it was locked. She'd watched Crane's people secure the area. They weren't amateurs, but they'd been focused on removing weapons, not checking every possible hiding spot. She dropped to the ground, rolled under the truck, felt along the undercarriage. Garrett had been military long enough to develop certain habits, like keeping backup equipment in places most people wouldn't think to look. Her fingers found it. A magnetic case adhered to the frame hidden in the shadow of the axle. She pulled it free, opened it. Inside, a folding knife, a small LED flashlight, and a Glock 43 with 1 magazine. 6 rounds plus 1 in the chamber if Garrett kept it ready. She rolled back out, handed the gun to Garrett, kept the knife for herself. Not much, he said. More than we had 30 seconds ago. A shout from the farmhouse. Someone had spotted movement or found their absence suspicious. Flashlights converged on their position. Time to go, Evelyn said. They ran. Not toward the woods this time, but along the gravel driveway toward the main road half a mile away. Risky, but roads meant civilization witnesses. People that Crane couldn't simply shoot without consequence. Gunfire erupted behind them. Muzzle flashes in the darkness. Bullets kicked up gravel and spanged off the truck's metal. Garrett returned fire, 3 quick shots that made their pursuers dive for cover. Not trying to hit, just buying seconds. They made it around the curve of the driveway, out of direct line of sight. Kept running. Evelyn's lungs burned and her legs screamed protest, but she pushed harder. Adrenaline was fuel and fear was motivation, and together they kept her moving. Behind them, vehicle engines started. The hunt was going mobile. We're not going to outrun cars, Garrett panted. Don't need to, just need to reach the main road. Then what? Then we flag down the first person we see and pray they're not working for Crane. Headlights appeared ahead. Someone coming up the driveway toward them. For a split second, Evelyn thought it was more contractors, that they'd been outflanked. Then she recognized the vehicle. Kincaid's Range Rover, driving fast, window down. Get in, Sterling's voice from the driver's seat. They didn't question it, just dove for the doors as the Rover skidded to a stop. Evelyn tumbled into the back seat, Garrett into the front. Sterling had the vehicle moving again before the doors even closed. Where's Kincaid? Evelyn demanded. Right here. Kincaid's voice came from the cargo area. Took a round to the leg, but I'm mobile. Get us out of here, Wyatt. Behind them, 2 more vehicles emerged from the farmhouse area. Crane's rental and the contractor's van, both in pursuit. Sterling punched the accelerator. The Range Rover's engine roared, pushing them up to 70 miles per hour on the narrow rural road. Not fast enough. The van was gaining, and Crane's rental sedan had surprising speed. They're going to run us down, Garrett said, checking his remaining ammunition. 3 rounds left. Can't fight off two vehicles with 3 rounds? Don't need to fight them off, Sterling said. Just need to survive the next 5 minutes. Why 5 minutes? Because that's when the cavalry arrives. As if summoned by his words, Evelyn's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Extraction inbound. Mark your position. 30 seconds. She looked at Sterling. You got the message out. Multiple channels. Sent everything to Admiral Hayes, to the FBI liaison, to 3 different oversight committees. Crane's operation is blown wide open. He just doesn't know it yet. The sound reached them before the sight. A deep rhythmic thumping that grew louder by the second. Helicopter rotors. Then they saw it. Military transport helicopter, probably a Black Hawk, dropping fast from the night sky. Spotlight illuminated the road ahead, turned night into artificial day. The helicopter didn't land. Instead, it paced them, flying alongside the speeding vehicles. The side door was open, and Evelyn saw figures inside. Tactical gear. Weapons. Not contractors. Real military. A voice boomed from the helicopter's external speakers, amplified to godlike volume. All vehicles, stop immediately. This is federal authority. Stop your vehicles or we will engage. Sterling hit the brakes. The Range Rover skidded to a stop. Behind them, Crane's rental tried to turn around, tried to flee back toward the farmhouse. The helicopter pivoted, with predatory gray spotlight pinning the sedan like an insect. Stop the vehicle! Final warning! The sedan kept going. Mistake. A burst of gunfire from the helicopter. Not aimed at the vehicle, but at the road ahead of it. Asphalt exploded, forcing the sedan to swerve and stop. The van had already surrendered doors, opening contractors stepping out with hands raised. They knew when they were beaten. Within 30 seconds, the entire situation was locked down. More helicopters arrived, these ones actually landing. Armed personnel and FBI tactical gear poured out, securing the scene with professional efficiency. Evelyn stepped out of the Range Rover on shaking legs. Garrett stood beside her, still gripping his Glock, not quite ready to believe they were safe. A figure approached from the nearest helicopter. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a Navy uniform with stars on the collar. Rear Admiral Victor Hayes, Office of Naval Intelligence, the man who'd authorized this entire operation and who just saved their lives. Lieutenant Blackwell, Hayes said, you look like hell. With respect, sir, it's been a long night. I imagine so. He looked past her toward Crane, who was being pulled from his vehicle and forced to his knees by FBI agents. Captain Crane was one of my best officers. I never suspected he'd been compromised. He wasn't compromised, sir. He believed he was protecting institutional interests. By murdering witnesses and covering up war crimes? Hayes's voice was ice. That's not protection. That's corruption dressed up as patriotism. Sir Colonel Merrick was still in the farmhouse when we evacuated, and Marcus Pierce. Hayes spoke into his radio. Within seconds, another team was dispatched to the farmhouse with orders to secure all personnel and evidence. 20 minutes later, medical personnel emerged carrying 2 stretchers. Merrick alive but unconscious, chest wound bandaged, and Pierce a body bag. Kincaid, limping on her wounded leg, moved to Merrick's side as the medics worked. He took 2 rounds protecting Sterling and me. Bought us time to fight back. He's stable, one of the medics reported, but he needs surgery. We're airlifting him to Walter Reed. Evelyn watched them load Merrick into the helicopter, the old colonel who'd carried guilt for 27 years, finally paying his debt. And Pierce, she asked quietly. Crane shot him execution style the moment he realized we were escaping, Kincaid said. Made sure the only witness who could testify about the conspiracy was permanently silenced. Hayes's jaw tightened. Then we'll have to build our case without him. Agent Torres, I want Crane and his contractors in federal custody, maximum security, and I want Dr. Cross brought to me. Now, they were led to a command post that had been set up in a cleared field half a mile from the farmhouse. Mobile lights, communication equipment, armed security perimeter. The full federal response. Inside a command tent, Admiral Hayes waited with Special Agent Rebecca Torres and another man Evelyn didn't immediately recognize until he stood. Senator Richard Thornton. Lieutenant Blackwell, Thornton said, Admiral Hayes has been briefing me on what happened tonight. You and your team were protecting me from a threat that came from inside our own government. Yes, sir. Though we didn't realize the full extent of the conspiracy until it was almost too late. Almost, Hayes said, but not quite. Thanks to quick thinking and excellent tradecraft. He looked at Cross, who'd just been escorted in by 2 FBI agents. She wasn't in handcuffs, not yet, but the fear in her eyes was real. Before anyone could speak, Cross's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. Hayes gestured. Answer it, speaker. She did. Crane's voice cold and furious. Dr. Cross, you've outlived your usefulness. I have contractors moving to your location. You know too much, and in this business, that's a death sentence. Goodbye." The line went dead. Cross stared at the phone, hands trembling. For the first time since this operation began, Evelyn saw genuine terror in the woman's eyes. "He's going to kill me," Cross whispered. "After everything I did for them for him, I'm just another loose end." Hayes leaned forward. "Doctor, you have exactly one choice right now. Cooperate fully, tell us everything you know about Operation Coldwater and who's protecting it, and we'll keep you alive. Refuse and you're on your own when Crane's people break through our perimeter." Cross looked around the tent, at Hayes, at Thornton, at Evelyn. Her eyes locked on Evelyn's. "Your grandfather tried to tell me 27 years ago," he said. "Vivian, there's no such thing as being safe by staying quiet. Eventually, they'll silence you too." I didn't listen. I thought I was smarter than him. Safer. "You have a chance to make it right," Evelyn said quietly. "Right now." Cross reached into her jacket. FBI agents tensed, but she just pulled out a small USB drive. Old model, the kind from the late 90s. "This is what Garrett gave me before he died. Everything he collected on Operation Coldwater. Bank records, photographs, testimony from Bosnian sources, communications between Voss and his co-conspirators. All of it encrypted." Hayes took the drive carefully. "Password." Cross looked at Evelyn. "Your grandfather chose you as his password. He told me if I don't make it, she's the one who'll finish this. The password is Evelyn, 1996. Your name and birth year." Something broke inside Evelyn's chest. Her grandfather, knowing he might die, had encoded her into his last act of defiance. His final message. His hope. "There's something else," Cross said. She pulled out her phone, opened an app, navigated to a hidden folder. "Garrett recorded this on a camera I gave him. Watch." She handed the phone to Hayes, who connected it to a laptop. Security footage appeared on screen. Grainy, dated 1997, but clear enough. The video showed 4 men in a Bosnian forest clearing. Voss, Victor Volkov, Garrett Blackwell, and Merrick. Voss's voice. "Victor, shoot him. That's an order." Victor in accented English. "No. This man is honorable. I will not kill him." Voss pulling his own pistol. "Then you're both liabilities." 2 shots. Garrett fell body armor, taking the impacts, but the force knocking him unconscious. Victor turned to run. Voss shot him in the back, then again in the head. Voss to Merrick. "You saw nothing. Understand, they both died in a training accident. If you talk, your family dies next." Merrick, voice shaking. "Yes, sir." The video showed Merrick waiting until Voss left, then checking Garrett's pulse, dragging him away into the forest. The screen went black. Silence in the tent. "Victor Volkov refused the order," Cross said quietly. "He was killed for his honor, and Alexei has been hunting the man who murdered his father for 27 years. That's why he came to America. Not to kill Thornton, to protect me, because I had this evidence." Hayes looked at Evelyn. "Your grandfather recorded his own attempted murder, and Merrick saved his life at great personal risk. This changes everything." "Where is my grandfather now?" Evelyn asked Cross directly. "Alaska, living under the name Robert Mitchell. Merrick got him out of Bosnia, gave him a new identity, helped him disappear. Garrett wanted to come back, wanted to see you. But Merrick convinced him that as long as Voss had power, your family would never be safe. And now? Now Voss will be arrested within the hour," Hayes said. "The evidence on this drive, combined with Cross's testimony and this video, will put him away for life. Your grandfather can finally come home." Hayes stood. "Agent Torres, I want this drive analyzed immediately. Senator Thornton, you'll get your hearings, and Dr. Cross, you're now under federal protection. You cooperate fully, you'll get immunity." Cross nodded, relief and shame mixing on her face. "One more thing," Hayes said. He looked at Evelyn. "Colonel Merrick is being airlifted to Walter Reed. Before they sedated him, he asked to see you. Said he had something important to tell you." Evelyn found Merrick in a medical tent, chest heavily bandaged, oxygen mask over his face. He pulled it down when he saw her. "Raven, don't talk, Colonel. Save your strength. No time." His breathing was labored. "Alaska. Coordinates." He gestured weakly toward his phone. "I sent them to you. Garrett's waiting. He's been waiting for 27 years to see you again." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because he made me promise. Didn't want you living with a target on your back. But now it's safe. Go find him, Raven. Tell him it's over. Tell him he won." Merrick's eyes closed. The medics moved in. "We need to transport now," one said. "He's stable, but he needs surgery." Evelyn watched the helicopter lift off, carrying the man who'd saved her grandfather's life. and lived with that secret for nearly 3 decades. Her phone buzzed. Text from Merrick's number. GPS coordinates in Alaska. In 4 words, he's waiting for you. 3 days later. Northern Alaska, the landscape looked like the end of the world. Endless white mountains like jagged teeth forests older than the nation itself. Evelyn's rented truck struggled up the dirt road GPS, counting down the miles to the coordinates Merrick had sent. 60 miles from the nearest town. This was isolation as philosophy. She parked outside a cabin that looked like it had grown from the forest. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. Her hand moved toward the concealed pistol at her hip, then stopped. This wasn't tactical. This was family. She walked to the door, knocked twice, footsteps inside. The door opened. An old man stood there. 86 years old, white beard face carved by decades of wind and sun, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Eyes she'd seen in photographs. Eyes she'd seen in mirrors. "Evelyn," he said, voice rough with emotion. "My God, you look just like your grandmother." She couldn't speak. This was her grandfather. Alive. Real. After 27 years of mourning a ghost. "Grandpa Garrett," she finally managed. He pulled her into a hug and she felt the strength still in those old arms, felt the heartbeat of a man who'd survived bullets and betrayal and 27 years of exile. "Come inside, little bird," he said. "It's cold, and we have a lot of time to make up for." The cabin was sparse but comfortable. Wood stove, bookshelves filled with military history and marksmanship manuals, and above the fireplace, a rifle. An M40A1, Vietnam-era sniper rifle lovingly maintained. "Cuba 1962, Garrett said, following her gaze. "Longest shot of my life, 1,800 yards. Until you broke the record in Kabul." "You know about Kabul." Merrick kept me informed. "Every mission, every success. I've been following your career, little bird. Couldn't be there in person, but I was always watching." They sat at the kitchen table, talked for hours, about Operation Coldwater, about Voss's arrest, about Crane's confession after Hayes had leveraged the video evidence. "Merrick saved my life," Garrett said. "Carried me 2 miles through a forest while bleeding from my own wounds. Got me to a village doctor. Gave me money and papers. Told me I was dead and needed to stay dead." "Why didn't you come back after?" Garrett looked at his weathered hands. "Because for 27 years I was dead. Your father mourned me. You grew up without me. I convinced myself you were better off. That coming back would be selfish." He paused. "And I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me for choosing mission over family. I could never hate you. Maybe not, but I hated myself." He met her eyes. "That night in Bosnia I had a choice. Destroy the evidence, stay quiet, keep everyone safe, or do the right thing knowing it might cost me everything. I chose principle, and it cost me everything. But you survived, and the evidence survived, and now Voss will pay. At what cost? I missed your childhood, your father's recovery, your grandmother's death. Was it worth it?" Evelyn reached across the table, took his hands. "You taught me that some things matter more than personal comfort. Honor, truth, justice. You didn't choose mission over family. You chose to be the man you taught me to become." Garrett's eyes glistened. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher. Even when he wasn't there, his lessons were." They spent the evening cooking dinner together, falling into an easy rhythm, despite the decades apart. After dinner, Garrett led her outside to a shooting range he'd built. Targets at 100 yards, 200, 500. The farthest at 800, barely visible in fading light. "Think you can still shoot, little bird?" Evelyn smiled. "Only one way to find out." Garrett handed her the M40A1. The rifle felt different from her Remington. Heavier, older, but solid. This weapon had history. She settled into position scope on the 800-yard target. Wind swirled down from the mountains, temperature dropping. She calculated, adjusted, found the quiet room inside, fired. Through the scope, she watched the target spin. Clean hit. "Not bad," Garrett said. "My turn." He took the rifle, settled into his shooting position. Movements slower than they'd once been, joints protesting age. But his hands were steady, always steady. He fired. His target spun. "Still got it," Evelyn said. "Muscle memory. Body forgets a lot, but this it remembers." They shot together as darkness fell, grandfather and granddaughter, 2 generations, honoring a legacy built on precision and purpose. When ammunition was exhausted, they returned to the cabin. Evelyn was scheduled to fly back to Virginia in the morning. Back to Project Artemis. Back to the hearings where she'd testify. But tonight was theirs. Will you come back, she asked by the fire. To the hearings to finally tell your story, Garrett stared into the flames. I'll come back, not for attention, but because there are still people who think what Voss did was acceptable, who think corruption is pragmatism and murder is cost of business. Someone needs to stand up and say no. You won't be alone. Merrick will testify. Cross will testify. I'll testify. All of us telling the truth Voss tried to bury. Good. Truth has weight. One voice can be dismissed, but multiple voices all telling the same story, that's harder to ignore. They sat in comfortable silence watching the fire burn low. Grandpa, Evelyn said, did you ever regret it gathering that evidence, risking everything? Garrett considered. Every day for the first 10 years. I'd wonder if I'd made the right choice, if staying quiet would have been smarter, safer. But then I'd think about the people who died because of Voss's greed. Those people deserved someone to speak for them. Even if that fight cost me everything. That's why I do what I do, why I became a sniper. Not because I like killing, but because sometimes taking one life protects dozens. Sometimes the shot you make saves people who'll never know you existed. You understand it then, the weight of necessary violence, the burden of doing what others can't or won't. That understanding is the real legacy, not shooting skills, the wisdom to know when to use them and when to hold back. I'll honor that legacy, I promise. Garrett reached up, took down the M40A1, held it reverently, then offered it to Evelyn. This belongs to you now. 3 generations have used this rifle in service to country. Your great-grandfather in Korea, me in Cuba and Bosnia. Now you. And someday, if you have a child who shows the same gift, you'll pass it to them. Evelyn took the rifle, felt the weight of history in wood and steel. I'll take care of it. I know you will. That's how legacies work. Not through words, but through actions. Through tools passed hand to hand across the years. 6 months later, Washington, D.C., the Senate hearing room was packed. Media, spectators, congressional staffers, history being made in real time. Senator Thornton sat at the head of the committee table. Behind him, photographs blown up to poster size. Crime scenes from Bosnia, weapons shipments, bank records. Everything Garrett Blackwell had died to gather and survived to see vindicated. This committee will now hear testimony regarding Operation Coldwater, Thornton said, a covert arms program that resulted in war crimes, corruption, and the attempted murder of an American service member who tried to expose it. In the gallery, Evelyn sat beside her father. Thomas Blackwell had flown in from Montana, his first time in Washington in 30 years. He gripped his cane, emotions playing across his face as he watched his own father, believed dead for decades, prepare to testify. Garrett Blackwell walked to the witness table with the dignity of age and purpose. He wore his dress uniform medals from Cuba and classified operations, a career of service that had cost him everything. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and then he told it. For 3 hours, he described Operation Coldwater, the weapons, the bribes, the massacres, the evidence he'd gathered, the attempt on his life, the 27 years in hiding. The room was silent except for his voice and cameras. When he finished, Thornton spoke. Chief Warrant Officer Blackwell, you served 23 years. You uncovered crimes at the highest levels, and in return, you were nearly murdered and forced to live in exile for nearly 3 decades. What would you say to those who argue that exposing Operation Coldwater damaged national security? Garrett looked directly at the camera. I'd say that real national security comes from doing right, not hiding wrong. Every time we cover up a crime to protect institutional reputation, we become less worthy of that reputation. My oath was to the Constitution. When I saw crimes committed in America's name, that oath required me to speak. The cost was high, but the alternative, staying silent while people died for profit, that cost would have been higher. The room erupted in applause. Over the following weeks, more witnesses testified. Merrick recovered from his wounds, described 27 years of enforced silence. Cross provided forensic analysis. Kincaid and Sterling testified about Crane's betrayal. 16 people were charged. General Voss received life without parole. Captain Crane, life without parole. 3 other officers received significant sentences. And the classified parts of Operation Coldwater were declassified. Exposed to light, it wasn't complete justice. Some conspirators were dead, some evidence destroyed. But it was enough truth, enough accountability, enough to honor those who'd refused to stay silent. 1 year later, Naval Air Station. Oceana Captain Evelyn Blackwell stood in Hangar 6, watching new Artemis recruits during firearms training. 6 women ages 23 to 30, all exceptional shooters. She'd been promoted after the previous leadership's implication in the Coldwater cover-up. The program survived, restructured with better oversight and ethical guidelines. Her phone buzzed. Text from her grandfather, "Catch anything." She smiled, texted back, "3 trout. UE. 2, but mine were bigger." Garrett had moved back to Montana, reclaimed his identity, bought back the family ranch. They spoke daily, visited monthly, making up for lost time. Her father had reconnected with Garrett too. It wasn't easy, but it was healing. "Ma'am," one of the recruits approached. "Question about wind calculation." "Sure. What's the scenario?" 800 yards, 10-mile-per-hour crosswind target moving left to right. "How do I compensate?" Evelyn smiled. This was her favorite part, passing on the knowledge, continuing the legacy. "Let me show you." They walked to the range together, instructor and student continuing a tradition spanning generations. The art of precision, the burden of responsibility, the wisdom to wield violence justly. That evening, Evelyn returned to her apartment. On the wall, 3 photographs in matching frames. Garrett in Cuba, 1962. Young and strong, rifle in hand. Herself in Afghanistan, 2022. Same steady gaze, same quiet competence. And a third photo new, taken at the Montana ranch, 3 generations. Garrett at 87, Thomas at 56, Evelyn at 29, and Evelyn's daughter, Emma, age 3, in her great-grandfather's arms. Emma wouldn't pick up a rifle for years yet. Might never pick one up at all. That would be her choice. But if she did, if she showed the same gift running through Blackwell blood, she'd have teachers. She'd have legacy. She'd have history and freedom to make her own path. Evelyn's phone rang. Admiral Hayes. "Captain Blackwell, got a minute?" "Yes, sir." "New situation. Sensitive. Might require Artemis assets. Can you come to the Pentagon tomorrow for a briefing?" She looked at the photographs, at her grandfather's eyes staring back across 60 years of service, at her own eyes reflecting the same commitment. Some people were called to stand in the gap, to make the shots no one else could make, to speak the truths no one else dared speak. The Blackwells had been answering that call for 3 generations. "Yes, sir," Evelyn said. "I'll be there." She hung up, walked to her closet, opened the gun safe. Inside, next to her Remington 700, sat the M40A1, her grandfather's rifle, her legacy, her responsibility. She ran her fingers along the stock, feeling decades of wear history embedded in wood and steel. Tomorrow she'd brief on a new mission. Next week she'd deploy somewhere dangerous to protect people who'd never know her name. Next month she'd train more recruits, passing on what she'd learned. But tonight she was just Evelyn, granddaughter of Garrett Blackwell, daughter of Thomas, mother of Emma, keeper of a legacy built on honor and sacrifice and the courage to do right even when the cost was everything. She closed the safe, locked it. Outside her window, the Virginia sun was setting, painting the sky gold and red. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new choices. But tonight, the ghosts were quiet. The debts were paid, and justice, hard-won and long delayed, had finally come home.